as if it's for real, but it's an exercise. And so we will discuss that with item 9.3, which is Richard's report. So yeah, hopefully we can receive that and agree to it.
Any questions or clarification from James? Seems straightforward. Thank you, James. The motion's on the screen. We'll receive that report as supplementary. So have a mover. Sam. Seconder. John. Any discussion? Put the motion on, please say carried. Thank you. 7.1, the unconfirmed, the minutes of the meetings of the previous agenda on page 10 to 17 of your agenda. No alterations or additions on those pages. To move in a seconder that we confirm those minutes from that meeting on the 13th of February 2025. Dan and Karen. No discussion. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Item number 8 on page 18. And CDEM Coordinating Executive Group Report. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Take it as read. Obviously, the idea is this report's up front so that you can see what was discussed at the executive group and how that's hopefully flown through to the papers that you received today. And I suppose the point to note is, which is included in the recommendations, that we felt that it was appropriate that we need to acknowledge and recognise the work that was done by the Whakahau and emergency response team, and particularly Jamie at the executive group level and Elizabeth representing the fly here. So that's what included recommendations. We acknowledge that. But everything else relates to matters that are on the agenda. Happy to take any questions if there's anything.
I just raise with you all. So we've got under point 6 about the 6th bullet point down, a conversation about rural lifestyle working groups. So there's an item there where Will and I will go and have a talk with Waimakariri District Council around some of their thoughts on what a lifestyle block looks like. And after that, we will bring a problem statement and a recommendation back to Joint Committee for a letter to go to Ministry for Agriculture or wherever we decide that's best to go, to try and get a better definition for what a lifestyle block is and how they're looked after during emergencies that we've been seeing multiple times now.
Dan, you might need that one.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chair, that would be really good. And from our perspective, would be there's a couple of examples of what's had to occur post-event and the significant expenditure that's happened on those. So if you give us a bit of notice, we could put together a program of appropriate properties to take you along to. Thank you.
We do have so in the KEG papers, if you get a chance to have a look at them, there is a suggestion, so that'll be a starting point. But, awesome, thank you.
On your last bullet point, Will, was you had an update on the weather event, and then there's comment about Lake Ellesmere, that the group could assist with in discussion. But I know the local MP in the area raised it negatively. Is there anything this group needs to do around that?
We had a discussion around the sort of the legal requirements and the triggers for being able to open the lake, and then the actual practicalities of doing it, and got a bit of a debrief from Stephen. But it was it was effectively.
Let's go. You won't hear it, just for the others.
It was effectively put back to Stephen to bring back to the group if there was any support that we could assist. It was just an offer to say, hey, this could be a bigger problem. We're happy to provide some support if we can. So the actions with with Stephen or his replacement at ECAN to come back to us.
I can provide a bit of an update. So at this stage, Environment Canterbury and Christchurch City Council, so Christchurch City Council looks after Lake Forsyth, Environment Canterbury looks after Te Waihora. We'll get the flood management people for both of those lakes to come together with the emergency management staff to try and create a shared understanding of how both of those lakes are managed, and then we'll see where that then takes us. But the first piece is to make sure that staff understand, the emergency management staff in both councils and region understand how it works.
Right.
Number of our cities are sitting as well.
You're comfortable, could they join the table? There's no one else sitting here.
Come on up. Yep. They wish. Thanks for that suggestion. So in the papers, you've got the Canterbury rural roles and responsibilities and preparing for adverse events on the property, and it's got the timeline calendar of anything that happens rurally, which looks to me like a good document to inform something happens. So well done on that. Nothing further on Will's report. CDEM coordinating the key group report. So there's a motion there on the screen. Give a mover for that. Sam. Dan. Any discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Carried 6-8. 8.2. Page 49. CDEM roles and responsibilities MOU. James.
Thank you for this. This has been a long time coming. It's been discussed on the committee previously and the KEG a few times, and it went to the last KEG, and they've made a recommendation for us to adopt this now, noting that that Ngāi Tahu were going to be a signatory to it, but with the whānau emergency response team being disestablished and no one currently there to be able to support an MOU around roles and responsibilities, the recommendation is that we go ahead as a council document, and in the future when Ngāi Tahu are able to re-engage with us, that we could include them. But also you'll note, I also suggest later on that even our emergency service partner agencies could eventually be included in this in a strengthening way. This is ready to be signed by both the mayors and the chief executives. There's an MOU, and then there's the actual the document that clarifies the roles and responsibilities, and they're all tied back to section 17 in the CDEM Act. So unless there's any questions, I think that we should be able to adopt it.
Thanks, James. Any questions of James?
Just a question on the potential new EM bills, anything of that might require some change?
I think the EM bill, when it comes out, if it's along the lines of what the discussion document actually had, then I think there would need to be changes to this, because section 17 would likely change.
Just in the MOU, I see you're seeking a term of that MOU lasting for 2 years and can be renewed for 2. Just thinking, why 2? Would 3 be better to fit our triennium?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing would be in a 3-year period, we will have a new bill, and so we will have to review it before then. But as a standard approach going forward, it would make sense that it fits with the triennium.
John? Or maybe I would hear from this one.
So yes, triennium, but does it want to align with elections? You might lose a whole bunch of folks. So if you lose institutional knowledge. So if it was every 3 years, it would want to be an off year so that you had in my mind, a rollover of mayors or staff or whoever in space.
Yeah, if we did it right now, which we're going to do, the outgoing will refresh for the incoming.
As long as that refresh happens, yeah. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
6 or 9 months of people getting their head around things once they step into office, if offices change.
Would
Happy either way, doesn't it? I'm not concerned.
would perhaps just because of the uncertainty of what the new CDEM Act will look like, or the new Emergency Management Bill looks like, perhaps we leave it at the 2 years at the moment, but make note that when the bill is settled and we know what that means, that a future version could become 3 years.
Okay, happy. There's a recommendation there. No further questions on the MOU and the roles and responsibilities.
So if you were to be adopting it now, then just need to be an adjustment.
Okay, so we'll put Karen as acting mayor.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, we'll change it. Yeah, great, thank you. Recommendation there on the screen. Someone like to move? Karen? Seconded. Craig? Go for it, Craig. Open the discussion. Put the motion, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Item 8.
So Neil, is okay if I work with Marie on the mayoral forum to get your signatures onto this?
Send it out to our PAs, I suppose, or the governance of their councils. Yeah. 8.3, Emergency Management Training Centre strategic goals. Again, James.
Sure. So hopefully you know that the group office have a private training establishment called EMTC, or Emergency Management Training Centre. It delivers mostly NZQA based courses to all of our volunteers, and our trainers come from our office, and they also come from your own organisations to deliver that training to volunteers. But it also picks up the training that we do for our coordination centre, so EOC and ECC staff. It's about to undergo its external evaluation review by NZQA. And one of the things that we noted is that we had never really come to joint committee around what its strategic goals are. So the strategic goals are there, and I'm happy, and core values as well, and performance indicators. I'm happy to take any questions on those. But for the external review, it's useful to have made sure that governance is aware of what those are, and if necessary, contribute to them. Happy to take any questions or go through those values, goals and indicators if you want me to.
Any questions for James? Nodding as there's none.
Well, not specifically to what you have here, but again, the question is when the uplift that's being talked about through the bill and funding, where does our EMTC team sit in relation to what might come in the future? Do you have a feeling for that?
Not really at the moment, John, but there's a thirst and a desire across the country for a more joined up approach to emergency management training delivery. And I think there is an opportunity for us to look at EMTC having more of a national status. And I want to do some work on what a business case might look like, as whether it's a close to council organisation or something else. And if that looks like it's feasible, we'll certainly come back to the joint committee for your comments. But a nationalised version would help the country out and also help EMTC have the size it needs to increase its capabilities or capacity.
So at this point in time, the talk of uplift that sits within the bill is a theoretical. We want to uplift, but there aren't that many opportunities or learning opportunities to bring that into play.
there aren't the mechanisms from a training delivery point of view. I think the first focus, deviating into MSIP a little bit, but the first focus will be about establishing standards that can be measured and then looking at training delivery following.
No further question? Question up on the screen. Move in a second for that.
Yep.
Craig. And John. Bit of discussion. Motion all vote aye.
Aye.
Carried. Item number 9, page 73. Joint Committee Resolution Status Report.
So in here, you'll see that we've got green lights on the first one, the second one there. If I can just go through these the individual points. The first one receives the coordinating executive group joint committee and reporting schedule. That has been reported. I haven't included it this time round, but are regularly including that now. So I think we can tick that one off as a regular update on our progress. Number 2 and number 3 we've just agreed to, so we can tick those ones off. And receives the CDEM group work program. The first iteration has been included today in the I think in those KEG papers, and there'll be more to come as we develop that group work program. So that one should still say, but the others I think are all completed.
Thank you. No questions, James, on that? Recommendation there. Move in a second. Karen, Sam. No discussion required. Motion, all in favour, please say aye. Yeah, carried. Thank you. 9.2, page 73, emergency management bill discussion document.
So this is sort of one of those things that's already happened, but you'll all be aware that we had the discussion document on strengthening New Zealand's emergency management legislation. A number of you were able to contribute to that online and in writing since then. There's a covering letter and our actual submission that went through to NEMA. So this is just for completeness so that you can see the final product and we can make sure that the public can see that we did contribute to that process. Once again, happy to take any questions.
Really lengthy and bold.
I think our submission, as I understand it, was the longest one. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it was. Yes.
Can I just ask, so we have collectively have a view of what it may or should look like, or the deficits that are sitting there, and you've been involved in those conversations with other groups. How does our submission align to thinking of others? It's not a question in my mind. I guess where do we sit in our thinking of where it should land to where others are or their thoughts?
It's very similar. It's there's some detail in some of the answers, but the general principles are the same. We felt at a group managers level that it wasn't transformative enough, but it didn't have enough detail as to where we want to go. If I can just sort of think through, the first part was strengthening communities. We agreed and the group managers agreed that we've got to move away from just thinking about public education to actually thinking about community development, community engagement, and how do we use community more effectively to help manage emergencies that are affecting them. So we agreed on that. There was a bit around strengthening the system that talks about strengthening the regional part of CDEM, and there's some differences there. We all agree that CDEM needs strengthening, but I don't think it was clear enough on what they actually meant by strengthening the regional part. So there's differences there. And I think that NEMA and the bill team will have to create greater clarity as to what they mean by that. Are they meaning regionalisation, which is not my interpretation of what they want, but they are wanting to strengthen the region so that we can strengthen local. And I don't know how that balance will come out yet.
It was interesting sitting for a few hours with the minister in Selwyn at the recent event, and his view of Gabrielle and some of those things, and what sits in his mind about the strengthening of region is he sees that as the strengthening of the whole system, and the TAs and the providers and a whole bunch of things falling over. So it will be interesting to see where it lands, because I think, as I articulate, there's nervousness about how much we strengthen the region, but we lose subsidiarity and the folk on the ground and the TAs of some decision making, and no one likes being told what to do. But if we're within a group agreed plan, that's different to being told. So just where that balance ends up.
And within the sphere of that, there's no disagreement that emergencies need to be local led. Whichever way you start to put it together, it's the community and local leadership that's absolutely required. I can't see that disappearing in the views of this government at the present stages when we can't do it.
It's got to be locally led.
I think there were some other bits that, across the country we saw debate around the piece about should civil defence emergency management be sort of that very strong hierarchical leader of all emergency events. And there was certainly debate. I think we generally agreed in our submission that it would make sense. I know Auckland Council was suggesting that more of the unified model works for them, but also acknowledgement that if we do go to this idea of civil defence emergency management sort of being the hierarchical lead for all emergencies, that all controllers and probably our staff would need a significant uplift in their capabilities and capacities to be able to pick up space where the potentially biosecurity quarantine type things, that overall leadership during a fire, it's not us actually delivering the water to the fire, but the management of it would need a bit of an uplift in all of our skills. So,
but that should be a very, very flat command kind of process. So yes, the controller has the powers
to make decisions.
But everyone else should be. It should be a collaborative process.
Yes.
Can't tell you how to put out a fire or put out a virus, but we need to be in that total picture. So I think we're in the right place.
Yeah. So once again, a bit of debate across the country as to what that looks like. Huge support for Iwi Māori contribution, but also from a national perspective, we know that there's engagement with the iwi Chairs Forum, but we know that has troubles or difficulties engaging with individual runanga, and they have plenty where there are 29 iwi, how it actually engages with those individual iwi. We've sort of got lucky here in Te Waipunanui with only Ngāi Tahu and top of the north being a little bit different, but
it's not Ngāi Tahu, it's Te Papatapu.
It's the runanga as well.
Yes, but that person didn't actually talk to me, so the politics of the runanga come into play. How do you find the right person that can talk to everyone and will talk to everyone?
Yes, as
opposed to the politics.
And I'll raise this issue later on in regards to the replacement of Elizabeth and the process for that, which we have uncertainty about. But that was another hot one in the conversation around submissions. I don't know, Mike, if you've got any other feelings from a NEMA perspective that you can talk to at this point, but it's probably too early.
Too early.
Yeah.
But we've got to be careful about being
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think there's also a note of caution in that conversation prior to iwi runanga conversation about civil defence emergency management being involved in a broader range of emergency events. And if I think about the impact of that on a territorial authority, like all our people have got day jobs. And so we know the disruption for a genuine civil defence emergency, and that's what we are committed to. But if we had to pull that group together for a whole range of other emergencies, there are significant ramifications for that, and we are not geared for that. So I hear our support for a broader role, but I think there's a fundamental challenge to the voluntary nature of much of civil defence now that is a roadblock or needs further work to think about how could you, we had that a significant fire the other day, and if we're now going to pull everyone out of their day jobs to manage some aspect of that fire, what does that mean for us? So I think there's a big word of caution around that previous conversation.
Thank you. No further, yeah.
So could I just, one other area where there seems to be quite a lot of commonality is the absence of recovery in any of the changes. The proposals come out of a review of response to the North Island weather event, and there's a need for some clarity, particularly around roles and responsibilities in recovery, and that's lacking, and it was, I think, has been raised in a number of submissions around the country.
Sustain.
Yes. I think Richard and I have been talking about this, about, you know, what might end up in the legislation at the moment versus what might come in as an amendment later on. But I think we certainly want to get a stronger acknowledgement of recovery, and then as we understand the processes and develop them like Richard's doing, we can influence further to what it looks like. I can't see us being able to come up with even the desired processes in the short time frame that we've got recovery.
Further,
I just wanted to, I thought just worth acknowledging James, Phil and Gavin and the rest of the team, because it's a really comprehensive piece of work and a process that they ran. I think, it doesn't really matter about the length, but it's the substance of the submission, and to get to a quality submission by taking everybody's views into account and reaching that middle ground is no small piece of work. So I'm just acknowledge that.
yeah, pass it on. Thanks very much to all involved in putting this together. It's document, so thank you for that. Yes. Any further discussion or questions? We've had good questioning. There's a recommendation there on the screen. Someone like to move it? In a second, Ben. And moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Motion all in favour, please say aye. Against carried. Thank you. Item number 9.3, exercise Whakahau update, and also that supplementary paper will go with it. Richard.
Yep. Yeah, kia ora koutou. So the in the main report is really just a bit of a summary of what the exercise is about, and it also includes the scenario and a holistic consequence analysis, which were integral to the exercise. So this is the first time that we've exercised in Canterbury recovery, and it wasn't a one-day exercise. It was over about 6 weeks. We had 4 introductory sessions with Recovery 101, covering about 15 hours. We've had 3 meetings with district councils with 5 districts participating, and then we had further 6 meetings with recovery environment sector groups. Each of those are 3 hours long. We had the recovery advisory panel, and then we've got the meeting today. So it's been a fairly extensive process over a long time, probably involving certainly well over 100, probably 150 or thereabouts, different people from, and many of them outside of councils as well. So many of the other agencies, as we need to do in recovery. My key objective in doing the exercise was to bring together all the structures and groups that we've got in the group recovery plan that was approved in November. So, you know, it's one thing to have a plan, but it's one thing, quite another to bring people together and have the conversation about what do we actually do. So the scenario was AF8. We chose that scenario because it's one where it would affect the whole region. And the supplementary paper is some things that have come out of the exercise, and it's intended as an example of what we might be bringing to the Joint Committee in a real event. And unlike response, where you declare the emergency and the controller essentially runs it from there, in recovery, it becomes inherently political because we're looking at all your own council's operations and budgets, as well as central government involvement. And so in a real event, I would be expecting that we would be involving the Joint Committee in a way that we don't in response. Perhaps just also a shout out to Ashburton, really embraced it, and also a shout out to Mackenzie, who sent 7 staff to the exercise in Timaru. And I'd also like to acknowledge Hamish Dobby, who came along to the rural sector meeting as a key representative. So thank you all very much. There are quite a number of things emerged from the sessions in terms of the priorities. They're documented in the exercise notes and that supplementary. And in a real event, what I would essentially be doing, and this speaks to the recommendation 1.1 in the supplementary paper, is I'd be coming to you and asking you, are there other priorities relevant to your district that need to be escalated to either a regional or a national level that are not covered? And then the other elements really speak to what is the recovery structure going to be, and the need to be advocating to central government on what would we like it to be, that brings together both the horizontal and vertical integration that we need to have in response. So just very quickly, by way of context, in the Christchurch earthquakes, for example, we had Sarah, which had a very operational component. Central governments decided they don't like that level of operational involvement. So with the North Island weather event, we've had the Cyclone Recovery Unit, and they've been very much standing back, quite a narrow focus, very much on policy, and most of the recovery has been left with local government. Probably somewhere in between those models is an optimal model. But one of the questions that arises is that in successive events, wherever we've had a national scale event, government has come up with a bespoke arrangement. And that's one of the challenges for us in recovery at the moment, because we don't know what that is. We can't form relationships with them. And when you have a bespoke arrangement, it takes several months, as we saw in the Cyclone Recovery Unit, for them to get up to speed and as to what they were doing. So in this paper, one of the things that we would be bringing to you would be a proposed model. This is what we want, but also recognising that that should be socialised with other regions if this is affecting the whole of the South Island. So there's a role, perhaps for yourself, Mr. Chair, in liaising with other joint committees, but also zones 5 and 6 of local government to bring a shared view of what we want to central government if we had an event such as this. We also, I'd just like to mention, we also had the recovery advisory panel. which formed, and they had a good discussion, and everybody I approached to be on that panel was very enthusiastic about being on it. They didn't have to twist any arms, and they are also keen to meet again within 2 months to talk about have further discussions about enhancing recovery readiness. So from my perspective, it was a success. There are a few things we need to iron out, as you would expect, but yeah, I'll stop there and take questions.
Thanks, Richard. Any further questions? Really good explanation there. No question.
Could I perhaps add to it?
Yeah,
through the
please.
chair?
Please, James.
I think in Richard's supplementary paper, section 47, I'm not going to go through them, but there are some key points there that the panel came up with that are really useful things going forward now with that we will work on, Richard will work on, that will help improve how we do recovery. So through their discussions, they identified these items, and they certainly, in my mind, ring true as really good things for us to continue to follow up on. That's on page, but it's item 4, well, number 47.
Yeah, recovery is very important. Yeah. With one of the R's of
Absolutely.
of the R's. So yeah, good to cover it and get it sorted.
And through the chair, can I, recognise the work that Richard did on this? As Richard said, it's the first time that a recovery exercise of this nature has been delivered in New Zealand, as far as we are aware. Although Richard's had help, he's been the main driver behind this, and most of the credit needs to go to him for the work that's been done. So thank you, Richard.
Yeah, well done, Richard. And others may learn from it as well, and in their own regions. Sure you'll be able to assist them if they wanted. Yeah, great. Further questions?
Richard, within the critical risks, paragraph 43, vulnerable individuals, households not receiving a report. How does that roll back into, I guess, the stuff we talked about in the EM bill of those disadvantaged communities? How do we turn that back in to ensure that we are getting to those communities in a reduction phase, as opposed to thinking about them in a recovery space? Do you have some thoughts on how that circles back?
I think the vulnerable communities is a very broad term for a whole lot of different situations, and I think through things like the our welfare group, for example, where we've got those connections, and the multiple agencies that need to be involved in that. I personally don't have any wonderful insights to offer an answer to, how do we make sure people are more ready? But I think there is that community element and advocacy. One of the difficulties is that often awareness of the risk doesn't translate into actually behavioural changes to address it. And I think trying to get behavioural changes is more difficult, and often that will miss out perhaps the most vulnerable.
I think in some of our early conversations around the bill, is that a role for civil defence? Do we have our CDEM pocket on, or is that part of UCA's community development or engagement folks? So where do we engage? How do we engage from a territorial authority view of TAs, you folk knowing when you're somewhat disparate communities or lower communities of whatever? So where's the relationship between us with a badge on going, we are civil defence, and the role of the territorial authority of working within their communities? That's something that needs to be thought in that earlier phase.
And it's been raised in the discussion document, and I don't see what the actual proposal in the bill is, other than the bill acknowledging that we've got to do it. It does talk about, in the proposed, more deliberate engagement during our group planning phase and the national planning phase with groups that represent vulnerable communities. But that's only going to pick up those that are known now, not those that emerge during a response or recovery. We've all noted, you all noted, if the bill goes through, how do we resource it? And that's one of those ones that how would we resource doing that?
I think we sometimes get stuck on the dividing line between what's civil defence and what's council. In actual fact, when it's local recovery, it's all the same thing. We're all working to the same goal, and it's the same people doing the job. So I think it's going to depend council by council, you know, what you consider BAU and what you consider recovery. So I don't think there's a real clear black and white line, civil defence on one side, council on the other. It's the same people doing the same job for the same purpose.
Combination of people combined. Further questions? No, there's a recommendation there. How are we going to do this, Oliver? There's a couple of recommendations there. Should we take them all as one, or do you want to do them as two?
If we do them as two separate reports, so the 9.3 first, then
Righto.
we'll do the 9.9 after that. But does Richard want to introduce it as well, like his introduction?
He's talked through it already.
Okay.
I've got it 9.8 first.
So we do
9.3, we'll do 9.3 now.
Yeah.
Which you've got on the screen. To move in a second for that. Karen, Dan. Any discussion? Just receiving that report. All in favour, please say aye. It's carried. So then we've got a 9.8, we've also got a 9.9, so there's two resolutions there. Jeez.
9.9.
We did 9.8 at the beginning of the
Yeah,
meeting.
Correct, right. Did that
I think that's
so
probably
we'll
enough.
paper.
9.9 would be is exercise, and so those points there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but we would be going through those points. You'd be receiving those points as a if this was real, rather than an exercise.
So should we be receiving them or just receive the 9.8
Oh.
resolution?
So the recommendation for 9.9 is written in a way that the committee can decide to do it without making any findings. So, yeah, that's why it's a noting rather than a use.
So we forget about 9.8.
And I've done that already.
Oh,
I've done
sorry,
that.
we've done that, yeah. We'll do 9.9,
9.9.
which is on the screen now. Moving a second for that. Sam, John, open for discussion. Went. Well done, good report. The motion, all in favour, please say aye. It's carried, thank you. 9.4, NEMA update, Mike. Well, sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll take my the update as read, and I'll just maybe confine my comments to the budget and an update on the bill. So as we know, budget was released last week by the Minister. All agencies were required to submit or find savings for all the grants and funds that they administer. Or that they're responsible for, and NEMA was not required to make any savings in that respect. So we got through with our current level of grant funding. However, having said that, we were not invited to submit as part of the budget for increased funding based on cost pressures or new projects or initiatives. So what that means, long story short, is that there's no new money for 25-26. We've got the same amount of money as we did in previous year's budget. So that's good and bad, I suppose. We've got public sector colleagues who are scrambling to make cuts and savings. In terms of the bill, over roughly 400 submissions, many of them substantial. I mean, you saw yours, which I think was over 50 pages. Yep, many around 50 or 30 pages. So we've got a very small policy team, which is crunching their way through that. I think that's quite a remarkable amount of interest in the bill, given the time frame over which it was consulted on and the the period, like it was over Easter, Anzac weekend. We've all done engagement and consultation before, and it was probably a really challenging time to do something of that nature. So over 400 submissions. It is still the minister's intention to table a bill into Parliament in October. Yep. So those are my comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mike. And just comment on the budget. It's good to see that the government's got inflation under control with no new money coming. 0% increase. So
Yeah.
inflation must be really, really low in civil defence. Tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I realise that.
We can't achieve it.
The minister did speak of the business case for to change. Where does that sit?
Yes. So James has referenced to MSIP, and you might be talking about that later in your update, James. So that the Emergency Management System Improvement Program has been delinked from the budget. So we're still doing the business cases for those improvements that I think you're referring to. We'll be taking business, and the minister will be making announcements on that later in June. We'll take business cases to cabinet, and I would anticipate that we'd be making submissions on budget 26-27 for funding for those improvements that you're referring to.
Sort of talked about the coming plan that sits within the bill, but how
100%.
I'm
Yeah.
working towards it.
Through the chair, I think there's a sort of decoupling between the bill and MSIP itself.
Yep.
So bill's the legislation, and you'll need to look at the funding for that. But the Emergency Management System Improvement Program, which is the follow-on from the Gabrielle review, there'll be separate business cases as well.
Yep.
The number of submissions also was 35, I think, was it you said?
Over 400.
Oh,
400.
400, yeah.
Yeah.
The 35 pages, yeah.
Yeah.
It shows good engagement, and it's good to get that number to give the feedback. So it's a positive, I think. And
I think so.
The length of submissions is also good.
Yep.
So great for that. Further, did you have something to add about Neil Fund?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I did. Thanks for the reminder, James. Did you manage to update Mayor Broughton? Yep. So the good news is that last night the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, signed or endorsed the Mirror Relief Fund for the recent events in Selwyn districts and Christchurch City of $50,000 each. I've just had an email from the private secretary. We'll get some confirmation around the comms on that later on this afternoon, and I'll link up with James on what that messaging from the minister's perspective will look like, so that you can. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at you, Dan, but no one just actually said. No, you didn't get me in Waimakariri. No, yeah, so we'll make sure that we link up with you so you can join up your messages on that. Yeah, or not to go through James for that.
Yeah, that's good news for yourselves in Christchurch.
Excuse me. I want to acknowledge that and say thank you for the work and support around it. It makes a big difference to our community, and like having the minister turn up on the day and knowing that the government's behind you is really great in all emergencies, but knowing that there's ongoing support from the government around recovery, not just in the moment, is hugely helpful. So thank you.
Sorry, that was rude.
Any further questions for Mike? Dan.
In general, if we the minister
Further, so there's a recommendation on the screen that we receive that NEMA update. Move it, Sam. Second, Craig. If you're all in favour, please say aye.
I'm in.
Next item 9.5 is the financial report. Thanks. On page 169.
Thank you. So this is remained essentially the same as the last time I reported to you. There's still an overspend within our lifelines budget, and that will continue through to the end of the year. I am keen in the future to look at whether that budget's sufficient for the work that they do or the work that we want them to do, and we'll raise that through the long-term planning process. And we've still got a bit of an underspend due to group office staff vacancies. Hoping to announce to my team what our sort of restructure looks like in the next couple of weeks. So that'll fill those vacancies. So we will end up with a small surplus by the end of the year, at least predicting a small surplus. And you'll see if you look at the reserve balance, that was sort of sitting above $1 million in reserve, which is we hadn't agreed to. We were going to look at the reserve and sometime in the future, probably in the LTP process, but we're getting closer to what you were thinking anyway, just through our natural processes.
Is it 1.2?
The reserve is currently set at 750k.
I think
But
Pam
was-
raised early
I
on
think-
of lifting it, was it suggested 1.2,
Yeah,
was it?
but-
So sort of achieving it by not doing much.
So happy to take any questions on the budget as it stands.
No questions? No, recommendation there, we received the third quarter 24-25 CDEM financial report. Mover. John, Sam. Got the motion, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Controllers Group 9.6, page 172.
Thank you. Can I just start off with this one, just acknowledging the passing of John Lamb. I don't think many people in the room will know John Lamb, but he was the regional controller before we had a CDEM group and during the initial stages of having a CDEM group. So he died on May the 19th, aged 90, but he was the controller from the mid to early 90s through to the early 2000s. And he was also instrumental in forming our Lifelines group in Canterbury, but also the national formation of Lifelines. And to me, one of his biggest achievements was penning the Risks and Realities book that some of you may know about, certainly Christchurch City will, that resulted in the strengthening of bridges and particularly Orion's infrastructure prior to the Christchurch earthquake, and we saw the dividends of that during the Christchurch earthquake. So I just want to acknowledge that that passing of him. And through my report, just there's some details of the flood there, just a collection of sort of what happened for your awareness, and noting that request for mural fund reliefs that Mike's already talked to. Around Ngāi Tahu whānau emergency response, so Ngāi Tahu have disestablished whānau emergency response. They did that back in late April. So I want to acknowledge the outstanding work, particularly Jamie, Keeler and Andrea did across the South Island to strengthen stronger relationships with iwi and emergency management. So we'll miss that. There's a note there about we did have the idea of establishing 2 mana whenua positions, one this year and one next year, in association in association with Ngāi Tahu. That's not going to be able to go ahead as it is at the moment, but there's a proposal that I look at creating a treaty partnership fixed term position within my office until we know what the bill is going to or the new act will do. Elizabeth Cunningham, who sits on joint committee, has indicated a wee while ago that she wants to resign. We've got a resignation letter from her. It's attached, but we haven't got any indication yet of a replacement for her. And so there's a couple of requests or a couple of recommendations that we write to Elizabeth to acknowledge her work, and write to Jamie acknowledging the work that he did for us. Then we've got just a note on certified emergency manager. So I just want to note that Gavin Treadgold in my office has achieved his certified emergency manager status from the International Association of Emergency Management. So this is the first staff member in any of our councils who's achieved this in Canterbury. So I just want to recognise the significant work that he put into doing that. The updated tsunami evacuation guidelines. This is about going to one zone for our tsunami mapping. I know that Gavin and Helen Jack and some of your own emergency managers are looking at how we adopt that and when we adopt it. Ideally, we adopt it collectively across the whole of the region rather than grab. So we will come back to you to talk more about how we'll implement that new zoning. At the last meeting, I noted that Chris Allen had passed away, being the previous chair or the chair of the Rural Advisory Group. David Hewson, who was the deputy chair, has stepped up into that role until the RAG does new appointment at its AGM. And we're in the process of appointing 2 positions to assist with RAG work, and that comes out of the extra $60,000 that Environment Canterbury put into the CDEM group budget for supporting Rural Advisory Group activities. Just a note there about the National Capability Development Steering Group. So that's focus area 3 of the MSIP, and currently I'm supporting that as and chairing the steering group for that. Hopefully I'm not having to do it forever, but trying to provide a bit of leadership in that space at the moment. And then there's a couple of letters that have been sent from the chair to government. The first one was an item on liability. Just sort of noting that particularly out of a state of emergency, controllers and the work that we do doesn't really have liability protection, but we still do stuff prior to a state of emergency being declared. So just asking that clarity could be provided in the new bill, and we've had a reply letter. It came through yesterday, so isn't attached, but I will include it in the next minutes in the next agenda for completeness, just acknowledging that that letter arrived and that that it's been forwarded to the policy team at NEMA to consider in the new bill. And the second one there is the road status information letter. Letter was sent to NZTA, to the Minister of Transport, asking NZTA to look at creating a national solution for national and local roads following the success of our one, and actually say that NZTA and NEMA have agreed to progress that. Don't know how they're going to or what that looks like yet, but they have agreed to progress that, which I think's I'd like to think you know, Canterbury's played a part in helping provide a solution to something that's been a problem, I think, as long as I've been in emergency management. Bit proud of that one. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, James. Quite a wee bit in there, and you may pass on congratulations also to Gavin for achieving that certificate that he did that work. Great.
In your
John.
partnership roles, we've got two, in my mind, distinct places. We've got an operation officer kind of level that sits at a key gap into EOC or whatever, and then we have a governance position. And I'm just sure who should be making the approach to governance space as opposed to operational space. And then if you are bringing someone into the office, then who's paying or where does that budget come from?
So if it's this treaty partnership one in a fixed term position, that would be an officer position, and that would come out of those two mana whenua positions that we're not going to be able to progress at the moment. So there's using funding that we've already got. And definitely with the intent that it's only fixed term until we understand what the bill might require of us or otherwise. But as in regards to Elizabeth's replacement, I'm not sure on the process.
I think it's probably better the chair. The chair probably sends a letter to Runanga, which you'll probably pen.
Yep.
And sign asking for a replacement. Now we've received the resignation. So we could add that to the recommendation.
I think it actually is there.
Is it?
Yep.
There's a bit of a devil being hand in play, and then again the politics comes in, but it's very heavy in the politics. But who ends up at the table that works collaboratively and wants to work in a space versus some that are a little more confrontational. It's just the right person and the right fit.
And it's important that we find the right person for this committee.
I have some thoughts, but it ultimately is not our decision. We could identify some criteria, but it becomes an election process for the election committee to ultimately nominate and vote for that person.
So the chair will ask for someone for them to do exactly that, but ask for them to nominate someone or deliver someone to us here. Right. Further questions? James's report. Recommendations there, and in that recommendation, I'll write personal letters under the chair's name to Elizabeth and Jamie for acknowledging the work they've done in service to the region. So do that also, along with a letter asking for a replacement for Elizabeth. So moving a seconder for the recommendation on the screen. Dan. Second, Sam. All in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. Next item is the report from the committee chair. 190.
Is anything in this year, but anything to raise?
No. Any items that the group members would like to have on agenda? There that we received the report from the chair. I'll move. Seconder. John. All in favour, please say aye. That gets us up to that is actually getting to the end. Yeah. Well done. So the next meeting will be on 21st of August.
I was in a funeral yesterday and I was talking with Brad Mosby there. He said they normally do have end representation. He would be keen to come along and meet with us and pass that on.
We have had fins, haven't we? Well, I can go back a few.
He's the regional manager.
He's the regional manager.
I know, Brad.
Yeah.
Just noting that Rob Hands, who's the district manager for Fins, is online at the moment, deputising for.
Yeah, we do have fins here.
No,
So
we do, but he just said to me yesterday. He heard that we were meeting in and said that.
I've
spoken to come and try some of the delicious delicacies we're receiving tonight, apparently.
I've spoken.
He said he'd be keen.
I have spoken with him and with the boss of police, Tony, about both of them being able to attend, and also about making sure that we've got the right representation from police and Fens on the coordinating executive group level.
Why don't we invite Brad to the next meeting in
Yes.
Christchurch on the 21st of August? And acknowledging also that Rob Hands is online with us today, and sometimes appears in person as well. Thank you for that. Next meeting, the Mihi for closure. Sam.
Urigia te uru mai. Te wātia, te mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wailawa I tāna taka. Koera e rongo. Pāria aki I ruia, kia tina, tina. Hui e, tāna kia.
Sam, declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance.